Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hey guys, it's Joe Simons. If you want to catch some monster redfish and some monster speckled trout this fall, then you've got to get your hands on the brand new Mulligan Bomber. We have been working behind the scenes on this for quite some time, and we've perfected it. The Mulligan Bomber has those proprietary dimples, just like a golf ball, that lets this paddle tail go farther than any other 5-inch paddle tail on the market. It also skips a whole lot better as well, enabling you to reach those fish that most people can't reach, especially those big ones. They're big for a reason. So make sure to get your hands on them. That's the 5-inch Bomber. It is the farthest casting 5-inch paddle tail we've ever seen. Comes with a little bit of scent already on it, but I would highly recommend getting some Dr. Juice as well. And you can find all of that only at fishstrong.com. So go to fishstrong.com. Insider members save 20% off everything in the store. And if you spend $50 or more, it's completely free shipping. See you over there. And here's the podcast. Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, Diamonds, back again. Got my man Travis Thompson back again as well. You've been on the podcast a few times, and we're talking about this Amendment 2 in Florida, this right to hunt and fish. To me, it seems like a no-brainer. And this very few bills are kind of supported by both parties. I mean, this seemed like an absolute no-brainer for everyone. And yet there's a lot of just craziness on social media of people just not understanding exactly what this is. So I wanted to bring you back on and talk about why you should be voting yes for this and why it makes 100% sense. So Travis, I know you probably have a laundry list of crazy things that you've heard. We were talking offline about, hey, I guess we won't need licenses anymore to hunt and fish, and we can shoot things on state parks, and China's going to be able to come in and fish all they want. What? This is nuts, right?
I've never seen anything as crazy as the pushback against an amendment that is one of the most innocuous amendments, but also one of the most important amendments if you fish or hunt recreationally in the state of Florida. Like, it's funny, you called it the right to hunt and fish. Like, that's a testament to how bad the name of the bill is the right to fish and hunt bill. Fish is first, hunt is second. Yeah. But the pushback comes first on the hunting side. It'll come for the fishing side eventually, but the pushback comes first, and makes sense. They have put it out there in social media. This is a right to hunt and fish, not a right to fish and hunt. And like, that's silly and a throwaway thing, but it's interesting that even colloquially it's gotten flipped around.
Yeah, that's wild. Let me see because I was just reading about it, and I know I read it that way too, which is wild. So
the newspapers are calling it a right to hunt and fish. The media is calling it a right to hunt and fish. It's just interesting. Like, you did, that wasn't on you. That's just like, it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I've heard that a couple of times the last few days, and I'm like, no, the name of the legislation, the way the amendment's written, the way that, I was instrumental in all of that stuff that occurred.
Yeah.
You don't write language, you bill drafting writes language, and then they give it to you and you're like, yes or no. And you give it back to them, and but I was instrumental. It's right to fish and hunt. 100% sure of that. But that doesn't get eyeballs as quickly as right to hunt and fish does. And so you get some concerted effort by I call them the anti-conservation movement to change that around, because that suits a narrative a little bit better for them.
So let's talk about the bill first and foremost, like what it is for people that maybe aren't aware of it, who brought it to the table, like why it seems like both parties are kind of agreeing, which is rare these days, on this bill, or this amendment. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to make a plug right here off the top. You can go to allfla.org/R2FH, right? The number 2 fish hunt. So R2FH. And we've got an FAQs kind of like background and everything else on this. And the ballot language is there. That's what I was actually just kind of pulling up. And I'm going to read it quick, Joe, because it's only 2 sentences. The entire amendment is 2 sentences. propose an amendment to the state constitution to preserve forever fishing and hunting, including by the use of traditional methods as a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. That's sentence one. Sentence two is specifies that the amendment does not limit the authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under section 9 of the state constitution. That's the entire amendment.
Wow.
2 sentences, 150-ish words. This was brought. I've been an advocate for a constitutional right to fish and hunt for 7 years. This was brought to me by Representative Lauren Mello and a number of folks, Mike Elfenbein. There's a group called the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt. A group that I've talked to for years about this is Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. A lot of your listeners probably don't know them, but Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation has one of the sharpest fisheries policy in the country. His name's Chris Horton, incredibly good guy. I remember sitting on a call with Chris 5 years ago, and he's like, man, you guys need a right to fish and hunt. And so it's not like this was a afterthought or a happenstance, but when Representative Mello reached out, she said, hey, I think we can run this. I think we can get this done. Can you help us? And we're like, absolutely. Like, we need to do this. And, we took it through. You can get some on the ballot 3 ways. You can wait for a constitutional revision committee. You can go collect signatures at the mall, or you can go through the legislature. We went through the legislature. And I'll be honest with you, I am not a lobbyist. I'm a guy that I'll talk to anybody about the stuff that I care about, though. And so we sat and we educated lawmakers and legislators on how this works. And it ran through the House and the Senate. It passed both of those. It had 3 committee stops. Someone said it was fast tracked. And I'm like, as a guy that pays a little bit of attention to national conservation, there's states where bills don't have to stop at committees at all. In other states, like you just put it out there and we vote on it today. There's no discussion or debate. So 3 committee stops. And I remember being frustrated because 2 of the committee stops were simultaneous in different buildings, and I couldn't be at both of them. So it wasn't like they'd been around my schedule or our stakeholder schedule. So we worked on it. We got the language to where it is today, which is language that we were very comfortable with. We got bipartisan support. I remember a few years ago, you guys had Lindsay Cross on this podcast. She's a state rep from St. Petersburg area.
Yep.
Lindsay was one of the co-sponsors on this. And I say it that way because there's a contention out there. Oh, this is a Republican bill. And this is right. Lindsay's a Democrat. There were 3 actual Democrat sponsors on it. And I don't say that with surprise because I don't think fishing and hunting and conservation are partisan issues at all.
No.
So I mentioned it that way to make sure people understand, like, we had a coalition that went on this. There was 1 nay vote in the House and Senate. And because of that, 154-1 is allowed to go on the ballot this November, where it is Amendment 2 on the ballot. The right to fish and hunt, A2, or Amendment 2 is what I call it now.
Wow. So 150-1, is that what you said?
154. There were 154 legislators there that day, and all of them except 1. And the one that voted against that, I can't remember what her issue was. It had nothing to do with fishing and hunting or the right to fish and hunt. It was a protest vote. I want to say it was a protest vote that abortion wasn't on the ballot or marijuana. It was something like that. She voted no until this was on the ballot. That was her reasoning. It had nothing to do with us. It was, hey, I'm going to vote no as a protest for another thing that needs to be on the ballot.
Wow. And yeah, of course, we got Amendment 3. It was funny. I was driving down the street here in Winter Haven, and I saw these vote yes, Amendment 3. And at first I'm thinking the fish and hunt. And then I was like, oh, that's a whole different thing. That's marijuana or whatever. But
yeah, I've seen some of those popping up around the state too.
Yeah. So you got 154 people who have now seen this in pretty simple language, 2 sentences. One person, like, let's just throw that out. Why is there confusion? Like, there's a couple people that are slinging mud on this. And I mean, it seems like there's just some way, way, way far out, like, things that don't even make sense what people are saying, right? I'm going to be shooting stuff in state parks and you can go trespass anyone's property and kill whatever. Like, that's not even remotely close.
I heard someone say the other day, we're worried if this passes, people will be shooting bears in downtown Orlando. That's what they said. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just clinically insane talk. So I think there's a couple of things unfolding there. One, we've seen attacks around the country on fishing and hunting, The one that gets talked about the most and the one that bears repeating here is in Oregon 2 years ago now, 2022, there was a ballot referendum brought forward that needed signatures. And it was 20,000 signatures short of reaching the ballot. So I think it had like 70 or 80,000 signatures. It needed 105 or 110 to reach the ballot. That ballot initiative would have criminalized hunting, fishing, animal husbandry, ranching, like dog training, anything that through the lens of that referendum, that law created harm to an animal so not just catching a fish, taking it home to clean it, hooking the fish could have been.
Yeah.
Like this is how crazy these people are. And I don't say that flippantly. Like I'm pretty respectful of a lot of folks, but this is how radical their views are on this type of thing. And so when you look at the states where those types of things are occurring, and every state's different, right? They're geographically different. And there's in Colorado, there's a referendum right now to hunt cats, where people will be able to go vote on whether or not you can hunt mountain lions, bobcats, lynx. I can't comment on the science of hunting cats in Colorado. Like we don't hunt cats in Florida, really. Like that's not a thing. But when you get into a place where you're putting legislative ballot initiatives to determine conservation topics, we call that ballot box biology. It ignores science. It ignores the wildlife managers determining how many redfish can you take, how many deer can you shoot, how many rabbits can be in your bag. Conservation has to be driven by science.
Yep.
And so protecting and hunting and fishing and not removing the authority of FWC ensures that science is going to drive wildlife policy moving forward. So the states where we've seen these challenges do not have a constitutional protection, a constitutional right to fish and hunt. There are 23 other states that have a constitutional right to fish and hunt.
That have basically passed the same bill amendment, right?
The same bill amendment. Different states have different constitutional makeups. And where I'm going with that is, like, we have a constitutionally created agency that administers game and fish laws in Florida. Arkansas has that. I think Virginia has that, but not every state has that. We also, there's a rumor out there all the time that private property rights will be impacted. So in other states, you'll sometimes see a third sentence that talks about this does not remove private property rights, or this doesn't affect trespass laws or something to that effect. And it was in our initial draft and it was taken out because the legislature said, this is, what's the word? They call it surplusage. This is surplusage language. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm not a lawyer. This is surplusage language because in Article 1 of the state constitution, it says private property rights are to be held sacred and shall not be infringed upon. You don't need to reiterate that because it's already covered. And people are like, well, this will infringe on private property rights. And we're like, no, it won't. We thought of that. Like we considered that when we were going through this. It's not a thing. So where you see those attacks occurring or where this protection doesn't exist, Florida is the only state in the southeastern United States that doesn't have it. Like I said, there's 23 other states that do. Minnesota has it. California and Rhode Island are not in those 23. Those are two additional ones that have a constitutional right to fish in their states. So really 25 have some type of fishing protection. 23 have hunting and fishing protection. So the idea behind this, I tell people all the time is, and I've asked this question on so many interviews, it's almost like rehearsed now. Do you have a lock on your front door? Joe, do you have a lock on your front door?
Yes.
Has anyone ever walked through it and robbed you?
No.
Why do you lock your house at night?
For that reason, I don't want someone coming in.
Exactly. This amendment, all it's doing today is taking something from a statute and putting it as a right. The way we regulate fisheries, the way we regulate hunting, everything else stays the same tomorrow. Like nothing will change after this passes. What will change is we make a clear and definite statement to the people that run like Oregon's amendment, which, by the way, the people that ran Oregon's amendment are now supporting No to 2, the group against this. They're in Florida. They're active in Florida right now. So we're sending a clear message that we're not going to mess around with this. And it kind of locks the gate on them. I like the term. This is a guard the gate issue, because once you get the first gate down, you go to the second gate, you go to the third gate.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guard the gate issue. It's like the first line of defense for. I love the phrase that the governor used, the free state of Florida. I love that idea. I love that concept. This ensures that long term, we don't get people taking away and shaving off hunting and fishing like we have seen in other states. And we talked about this a long time ago, I think, on this podcast. Hunting and fishing are two of the most important conservation tools in the toolbox. Like, arguably the most important. I think it's arguable, but I think they're near the top. So anyway, it's more of a proactive measure. We don't do a lot of strategic conservation work. A lot of stuff we do is very reactionary. Like something happens, like the state parks, and we react because we weren't ahead of the curve on that. And I'm not saying somebody could have been ahead of the curve on that, but we react. We've got to stop chasing our tail and get proactive about conservation work. This is proactive conservation and needs to be put into place right now.
Mm-hmm. Where did, in your opinion, where did anglers and hunters with that whole state park, the pickleball golf, I assume you would agree they were pretty instrumental. And, I mean, at least on my feed, because I have a lot of hunting and fishing friends, people were, super loud.
I don't know anybody that was on the other side of this. Like, I don't know anyone that's on their side of it. Yeah. Like, I know some people, myself included, like when I saw it come out, I took 2 beats. Like it was a day or so before I engaged on it, because I'm like, something's not right here. Mm-hmm. Like the way this got leaked, it got leaked on election day eve. It came out on election day that the meetings were happening. There was something else going on. And I spent a lot of time on the phone on that Wednesday and Thursday figuring out what is what. And I'm like, oh, this is just dumb. Yeah. Like clearly it's just dumb. Release the hounds.
That was cool. I mean, I was proud of all of the fishermen and hunters, the outdoorsmen and women that got behind and just said, this is baloney.
Which Amendment 2 to me is the same kind of thing. And I don't understand. There's, like I said, there's a very small noisy faction that is against it. But Amendment 2 is really, truly, well, here we go. Joe, I know that you've got some connections familially to the wildlife corridor. Mm-hmm. Or Luke has connections familially to the wildlife corridor, but you're familiar with it.
Yep.
The Florida Wildlife Corridor, for those that don't know, it's a very strategic conservation idea. It's another really good idea.
Yeah.
They went to the legislature. They said, hey, we want to create a green infrastructure up and down the state so that theoretically a panther could walk from Big Cypress to the Okefenokee Swamp. A deer could traverse, a bear could traverse. You've got lands set aside for birds and gopher tortoises and things we hunt, rabbits and deer and quail and turkey. Yep. The Florida Wildlife Corridor, if you look at the framework of it, today it's about 10 million acres, let's call it, because that's easy math. Based on Florida Natural Areas Inventory and cross-referencing that, almost 80% of that land is hunting is used as a management tool on it. So that's significantly important as a conservation tool. And also 19% of the total corridor currently was acquired with sportsman's dollars, meaning hunting and fishing license fees historically in the state were used to fee simple acquire the land, or maybe a less than fee acquisition. Those are terms in like land conservation or land acquisition. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds there, but 19% of it, that's not a number that we made up as hunters and anglers. That's a number that came from Archibald Research Station in Lake Placid. They did the research and the numbers they crunched and like, look, without hunters and anglers, like the framework that the corridor is built on doesn't exist. And if the framework doesn't exist, we don't move forward. So protecting this is a thing. I put it kind of simply. If you want wild lands and you want clean waters, you better dang sure make sure we've got hunting and fishing protected, because we know that in North Carolina, the state said with the right to fish and hunt with the same language we have, traditional methods, preferred means, responsibly managing. They said the right can't exist in the abstract. You have to be able to exercise it. What that means is there were gill netters in North Carolina. Gill netting is still legal in North Carolina. There were gill netters that were impacting a fishery so much that recreational anglers weren't able to go and catch fish. Mm-hmm. the case is still ongoing, but a judge gave standing to the recreational anglers based on this thing we're talking about right here to say, no, 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 we're giving standing to them to go contest the gill nets and how much they're taking. Again, I don't know North Carolina laws around gill nets or anything else, but how much they're taking, where they can take it, everything else, because it's impacting the recreational angler. You have to have places to be able to hunt and fish if you have a right. It can't just exist in theory. And then we say, hey, we poisoned all the fish and we killed all the deer. You're not allowed to do that anymore. You have to be able to exercise those rights. It's a huge conservation thing, a gigantic conservation thing.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, so based on your numbers, if there's approximately 10 million acres and 20%, I mean, we're talking 2 million acres are essentially protected and are, in terms of conservation in just our state from anglers and hunters. That's awesome.
From our dollars. The other thing that's important there is, I'm sure most folks here, almost all hunters have a fishing license, but not all anglers hunt. So most folks here listening to this have a fishing license. So you've talked before, I've heard it. I know we've talked about it some before. You've got your WSFR funds, your wildlife and sport fish restoration dollars. And that's when you buy a license, there's a federal excise tax on fishing tackle or hunting tackle or shooting ammo that comes back. It has to be utilized in certain ways. It is earmarked to be utilized certain ways. So on the sport fish side, there is a dollar amount or a percentage of the dollar amount that has to be earmarked to use for boat ramps. That can be used for boat ramp maintenance, can be used for new boat ramps, but it has to be used for access to waters. Mm-hmm. So I say all the time, if you got friends and family and they jet ski, they pontoon boat, I mean, we live in Winter Haven where you've got the chain of lakes. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there without fishing poles on their boats every Saturday morning. Guess how they're getting on the lake? We've got dollars in that concrete that they're using. Mm-hmm. That's how I like to describe it. You're getting on the lake in part because of, it's not entirely us, but in part because a fisherman at some point bought it. My dad, my grandfather, me, my son, we bought a fishing license, and that helped pay for the ramp that you use to get in on Lake Howard or Lake Ship or wherever it is. And it's helping to maintain it. You may not hunt or fish a lick, but you dang sure better think a hunter and angler. And that's a good reason to vote for this, because it's the thing that's allowing public access to some of these resources. And like we talked about public land a minute ago, waterways, land, these are things that we're getting you in, and we're asking for your help to protect it long term from a tax that you're not going to agree with.
Yep. And I don't, a lot of people don't know this, but I mean, every single Slam Shady that all of you listening have bought, every Moonwalker, literally every piece of tackle we have to pay an excise tax. So it's not you. We have to pay that, and 10% approximately on the original cost.
Yep, the manufacturer cost or something like that. Yeah,
the manufacturer's cost. So we're cutting checks. I don't know if it's every month or every quarter, but and all that is going to help exactly what you said. From boat ramps to keeping the waters, clean, safe. We're just one company. I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars over a longer period of time that is all funded essentially from anglers and hunters, because hunting is I assume it's on ammo too. And
hunting is, so there's less stuff it's on hunting, but it's on any firearms, it's on any ammo.
Okay, it's a firearm. Okay.
Certain archery equipment. It's not on like a blind bag or I don't think it's on like a turkey call. Whereas on fishing, I know trolling motors, tackle boxes, reels, rods, like it's a pretty significant number. And the other side of this conversation too is, and I don't want to turn this into an us versus them type thing, but the other side of this conversation is, I've been in rooms before at a national level where it's brought up, well, why don't we implement a backpack tax in a similar manner for the hiking community? Like, let's put an excise tax on tents and on backpacks and on binoculars and on hiking sticks or boots or whatever. Mm-hmm. And overwhelmingly, the environmental brands, and I won't say their names here, but some of them vastly celebrated environmental brands, said absolutely not. We will not stand for that. Hunters and anglers came forward in the hunters came forward first in like the 30s or 40s. That was Pittman and Robertson were the two senators. And then Debbie Dingell And again, both of these things were bipartisan. Debbie Dingle was the most famous, or maybe it was her dad, Bob Dingle, John Dingle. In the 50s, they copied it for fishing. And we call it the user pays public benefits model. We are the users, and we are willing to pay, and it's going to benefit everyone.
Yep.
That model carries through in right to fish and hunt. We are doing the stuff out here. We're going to continue to fish and hunt the way we always have, within the regulations set by the state. So if tomorrow it's determined there's not enough redfish to keep one in Tampa Bay, and I haven't looked at the redfish regs. I don't keep redfish very often. I don't fish for redfish very often, but like, if tomorrow it's determined by science you can't keep that, this doesn't affect FWC's ability to close the redfish for, a month or 6 months or until stock assessment's redone.
Yeah.
Similar, it doesn't affect their ability to say we're not going to shoot deer over this size, or you can only keep 5 squirrels or whatever. All this is doing is saying long term, hunting and fishing need to be considered as a wildlife management tool, just like it has historically, just like it always has. And it needs to be considered until someone comes back 200 years from now and gets this thing overturned, which I hope they're not able to do.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. Trying to lock the door to protect something we care about.
That's the best analogy. I mean, that is scary that you could get enough, I'm going to call them a little bit of a wacko together to say you can't even attempt to catch a fish or go out there and enjoy things that we've done for many generations. And that's crazy.
So some myths we've kind of heard that I think would be relevant to some of your listeners. There's two that kind of stick out to me. One is that this would undo the net ban. Okay, that's something that's out there in the water supply. This is going to undo the net ban. It's going to undo the net ban. It's going to undo the net ban. First, the flip inside of me says, do you think we didn't think of that? Like, do you think that wasn't included in this conversation?
Yeah.
So the net ban is protected by constitutional amendment already. I don't want to put anybody on blast, but there are agencies in charge of regulating fisheries and net bans and things like that. You can read between the lines who they are. Ask them if this would undo the net ban. It doesn't. Like, there's no risk of this undoing the net ban in any way, shape, or form. We ran this by a bunch of constitutional attorneys and a bunch of agency attorneys to make sure there is no risk to it. CCA Florida, Joe, you were a little bit behind me in school, but when I was a senior in 95, and my senior theme in Miss Hamilton's English class was about the net ban and the importance of it. So that's how significant this thing is. CCA back then was FCA. And now I'm a CCA lifetime member, but I know there's mixed feelings out in the fishing community about CCA. One thing people can argue about is that CCA got the net ban done. And the other thing you can't argue is CCA would do nothing to put the net ban at risk. CCA will tell you to vote yes on too. They fully support it. So from an angling community standpoint, there's nothing in the smell test that tells you this is going to undo the net ban. They're like, well, traditional languages could be interpreted as no. Traditional means that which is legal at the time of passage. Well, why did you use those words? Because they're proven in 12 other states. 11 other states have traditional methods. And there was a state, I think it was Louisiana, that did not have traditional methods in their language. And the United States Forestry Service came in and took a hunting operation off of a giant national forest. And hunters sued or challenged it or whatever. And it lost. The hunters lost. There was no push for it besides the anti-hunting community. Overwhelmingly, everyone supported hunting on that property, but they did have traditional methods protected. So this does not undo. This is not undo, just the same way this doesn't undo that you need a license, that you can't hunt at night with a light, that you can't bow and arrow snook or spearfish snook. Just like all those regulations are protected, the net ban's protected already by constitutional amendment and by FWC's regulatory authority. And so is all the other stuff that exists out there is going to continue to behave the same way it does now. And we're still going to go to FWC commissions and argue about it, just like we do now.
Yep.
Like, what's the slot on Goliath grouper? What's the season on this? We're going to get to that the same way we've always gotten to it. And it'll still continue to be a thing that we kind of like have to advocate for and show up for and everything else. But what this does do is lock the door on taking it off the table entirely across the state.
Yeah. Yeah. Your analogies about locking it up it's it. It doesn't undo anything. It doesn't reverse anything. Doesn't change anything. It just locks. It locks everything we have in. Right. I mean, because think if all of a sudden someone tried to undo the net ban, and one, it would be a really small group to even want to do that. And just like the whole golf course thing, we'd be up in arms. It would never have a chance.
There's no chance.
Yeah.
There's no chance. The other one that always gets me, and the net ban falls into this same thing. There's a Latin term that lawyers have taught me called impera materia, which means you have to read as a whole. So when you read the Constitution, if there's overlapping subjects, you have to take them together. You can't say, oh, this says traditional methods and I interpret this, and I'm going to ignore Amendment 35 that talks about gill nets. I'm just going to look at traditional methods. If we wanted to undo the gill net ban, because it exists as an amendment, we would have expressly had to say, this undoes the net ban in Amendment 35. Like, you would have expressly had to call it out. And the best analogy I have for this is private property rights. I'll go back to that for a second. And I use this analogy all the time. You have the right to free speech. In the United States, you have the right to free speech. I have private property rights, both United States and you have the right to free speech in the state of Florida too. But couple of things. One, there's time, manner, place. It is regulated. You just can't say anything you want wherever you want, because you can't walk into a movie theater and yell fire. We know that. Time, manner, and place is always provided to rights. Yeah. So it's not like you now have the right to fish and you can go on someone's property, or you can take with illegal methods or anything else, even without FWC's regulatory authority, which is still protected. But the other thing is, you can't come on my private property and exercise your right to free speech, because it doesn't trounce my private property right. Like, you can't use those rights. So similarly, the right to fish and hunt with traditional methods does not trounce our constitutional amendment that says you that you can't use net ban. So that argument carries no weight. The other one that was silly offline that we talked about a little bit was the commercial fishery. There's a rumor floating around that this was done. It's on Nextdoor, which should tell you everything you need to know about it. That's where it originated. It gets copied and pasted out of Nextdoor. But this was a push by the commercial fishing industry so that foreign entities could come trawl Florida's waters and take all of our fish. And the silliest analogy, I hate this, but the silliest analogy is in a state where you can't watch TikTok at a university because it's banned because of the Chinese Communist Party. We convinced the legislature to almost unanimously vote to allow Chinese angling interests to come into our state waters and wipe them out entirely. Tell me where you're getting that from. Like, some guy made this up in his basement one night, or his mom's basement, and was like, oh, I think this is a good rumor. Let's put it out there in the world. And I can't believe I've seen that. And I'm like, smell this for a second and tell me if it smells right, because it just doesn't. It doesn't pass the suitableness test.
That's crazy.
So
what else? What are any other big myths? Like, what, why?
We see people get hung up on preferred hunting, fishing, and taking the wildlife should be the preferred method for responsibly managing wildlife. Preferred isn't defined, and I'm like, look it up in the dictionary. It means considered first. Like, that's what it means. And the simplest example of this I give is, let's say Florida got overrun with mongoose tomorrow. Let's say there were 1 billion mongoose that just showed up in the state of Florida, and we got to do something to manage them. If those mongoose are living out in the woods, we would prefer that people use hunting to go. Like, that seems like a good idea, rather than us as a state paying trappers to go trap them. Is there a way that we could leverage hunting to go do that? Maybe we use hunting and like a nuisance trapper type program, like we do with alligators. However, if those mongoose are living in downtown Orlando in apartment buildings, we're not going to put a guy out there with a 22 and let him start sniping mongoose because it's in downtown. Like, time, place, manner matter in rights.
Yeah.
That's not my opinion. That's like constitutional law. Time, place, manner matter. So we prefer for this. So consider it. Does this seem applicable? Well, no, they're in high-rise buildings in downtown Lake Eola, like we can't do that.
We can only shoot bears in downtown Orlando.
Yeah, like that was the thing somebody said is we're gonna have people running around downtown Orlando shooting bears. And I'm like, where do you get that from? Because FWC regulates that you're violating private property rights, you're violating municipal ownership. Like there's so many things that prohibit that. Trespass by projectile is illegal. You go to jail immediately.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah,
the number of silliness. But the best real life example is when lionfish showed up. I guarantee you there's some solution out there where you could drop a chemical in the water or something like that and poison those fish on reefs. And it would have impacts to other fish. It would have impacts to other. The preferred method was, can we use spear fishermen? Can we use anglers? Is there a way that we can use the citizens of the state of Florida and it not cost the state taxpayer dollars? Instead, they're buying a license or whatever. Or I forget what the thing is on lionfish, or if you catch enough, you get a free lobster in lobster season or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Can we leverage hunters and anglers? We've done it with pythons. When pythons overran the Everglades, what did we do? We went and contracted people to go hunt them. When alligators are out of control, we have alligator hunting season, or they're not out of control, but they've got a sustainable level. We created an alligator hunting season, but we also recognize that alligator hunting can exist fine on Lake Toho or Lake Istapoga or Lake Okeechobee, or, we live in Polk County. You can hunt a lot of public lakes in Polk County, the Winter Haven chain and stuff. At the same time, there are private lakes and private residences and nuisance gators that show up out of alligator season when we don't want unregulated take. In that case, or unregulated is not the right, when we don't want hunters that are not trained like nuisance gator trappers are trained to manage these. So we have a hybrid solution there where we hunt and we nuisance trap for this animal. None of the stuff I'm saying is shocking. Everyone is probably nodding their head and goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is the most common sense thing on the ballot you will see this year based off everything I've seen. This is the most common sense thing you see on the ballot. It's low risk. If you like to fish, if you like to hunt, if you like clean water, if you like wild things, you should vote yes for this. There's no risk to it. There is no downside to it. Those are the big pushback and things I see. Like it. Beyond that, I mean, there's crazy stuff. It's going to open up hunting in state parks. No, it doesn't. Like I was thinking about that. I was like, I don't even know how to defend that. That's how crazy that is. Like, no, it's nonsensical. Maybe it is protected. If anyone's wondering, Florida state parks. There's an administrative code that says hunting is prohibited in state parks, except in some reserves were administered by FWC. Who has constitutional authority to regulate where you can and cannot hunt and fish? FWC. So the people are like, oh, this is a move to get us hunting in state parks. No, it's not. No. If there was a giant park, if we turned Ocala National Forest into a state park, FWC would consider allowing hunting there because it's 25,000 acres or whatever. But again, they're going to have that constitutional authority to do it. This is not to go open up Homosassa Springs. This is not to go open up Weeki Wachee or Jonathan Dickinson or any of that other stuff. There's no way that can happen. No one's going to let that happen legislatively, rulemaking authority wise, or anything else. It's just not possible.
Yeah, and this amendment doesn't change any of that unless you got a pickleball court on Dickinson Park and there was a mongoose, then you could shoot it.
What if this amendment, man, that's a great conspiracy theory. What if this amendment was created by Big Pickleball? Does anyone consider that? Put a myth out there about that. Maybe the anti-hunting, anti-fishing guys will do that next. This is Big Pickleball is on the payroll of Amendment 2.
I love it. Well, cool, brother. Thank you again for coming on here. Everyone vote yes on this Amendment 2 here in Florida. And I know we have a lot of listeners who aren't in Florida. If your state doesn't have this, how many total now have
23 states have it.
And then 2 more with fishing.
I've actually helped some people have conversations in North Dakota, Iowa, and Ohio about this.
Cool.
And those are in their infancy, but I think in the next 2 to 4 years, you'll start to see other states adding it on. I don't know why every state doesn't have it. Vermont put it in their constitution in 1777. Because they had the forethought to think, we want to make sure this is always protected. When Florida was created in 1845, what do you mean we got to protect hunting and fishing? That's absurd.
Yeah, it's just
like the whole state is a swamp. What are we going to do here?
Yeah.
So it wasn't given that consideration back then, and it's time for us to protect it now. And the other thing I'll say is, if we wait, some people have said, well, where are the challenges in Florida? And we see small challenges. We see small challenges where this would be, it wouldn't be the tool that is used, but it would be nice to have like in our back pocket. But I do say when this becomes necessary in Florida, you won't be able to pass it. If that's 8 years down the road, 10 years down the road, this is proactive. We need to pass it now so that when it does become necessary, we have it to fall back on, because that's coming. It's coming in our lifetime. Our kids are going to face it hardcore if they fish or hunt. And our grandkids, man, they're going to be thankful that this happened.
Amen. Cool. And give everyone your website again. And
allfla.org. And if you want information on Right to Fish and Hunt, it's /R2FH is kind of an FAQs informational page. And then we've got a bunch of slides with like actual citations from case law and everything else on allfla.org/A2 is that link, Amendment 2.
Cool.
And you can go to allfla.org is our social media and we've got a lot of information there. We link to a lot of stuff. We share a lot of stuff. And the other thing I'd ask your listeners is if they see people sharing this stuff, please reshare it on your stories, on your feeds, on whatever. Like the best way to combat misinformation is to get better information out there. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So whatever we can do to kind of spread that message would be hugely appreciated.
Amen. And you might want to get the R2HF too, just in case someone goes to the wrong side.
That's a good idea. I may link that. I may create another hyperlink.
Yeah, and forward it over. So awesome. Cool. We appreciate you big time, Travis, all that you do, and just for all the knowledge too. It's awesome. You hearing it from someone who is kind of in the trenches, has been a part of this for years, and we appreciate everything you do, buddy.
Thank you guys for having me on, Joe. Really appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir. Guys, make sure to go to Travis's site, subscribe, like, all that stuff on social media to follow more on this, and make sure to show up and vote here coming really, really soon. It's nuts how quickly this year is passed.
November 5th is election day. I think early voting opens October 20th.
Yeah, that sounds right.
In October. Last day to register to vote is October 7th. And you need to request an absentee ballot if you're going to vote absentee. That's not renewed every year. You have to request them every year now. You need to request that soon, but those absentee ballots will be mailed on September 26th.
Coming up. So, cool, guys.
Overseas. If you're a veteran overseas, it's September 21st.
A lot of dates to remember.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, bro. Well, thank you again, everyone. Comment down below too. We'll make sure to put this on the blog post. If you have any questions or anything else that you've heard about this, let us know. We would love to address it, and maybe even do one more podcast here before November. So appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. 'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. You'll find us on the water if there was a way. Said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today, for he's the reason why we are this way, and he put fishing in our souls to stay.